In the summer of 1993, a young undercover cop walked out her front door and never came back. Her name was Officer Lisa Harper. She was just 27 years old, a daughter, a sister, and a newlywed who had her entire life ahead of her. That night she was supposed to come home. She never did. Hours later, her car was found abandoned on a dirt road. The driver's door was wide open. No struggle, no footprints, no clues. It was like she had simply vanished. But Lisa didn't just disappear. Someone made her disappear. For years, her family begged for answers while rumors swirled. Was she caught by the gang she was investigating? Did someone she trusted betray her? Or was there a cover-up hiding the real truth? Then, 14 years later, a farmer made a discovery inside an old water well. Something so disturbing it would finally expose what happened to Lisa Harper, and it was far more terrifying than anyone ever imagined. This is a story of loyalty, betrayal, and a mystery buried in plain sight. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more true crime stories, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Lisa Harper was only 27 years old when she earned her badge. She wasn't the kind of cop who bragged or tried to look tough. Instead, people noticed her because she cared. She listened to victims, checked on neighbors, and treated everyone with respect. Her supervisors saw something rare in her, courage mixed with kindness. That mix made her stand out, and it also made her the perfect candidate for dangerous undercover work. In 1993, rural counties across her state were fighting a growing drug problem. A small but violent gang was moving narcotics through back roads and farming towns. Police needed someone who could blend in, someone who looked trustworthy, someone who could get close without raising alarms. Lisa fit that role. She cut her hair shorter, changed the way she dressed, and spent weeks learning how to talk like someone who lived in the shadows. When she walked into bars or sat in diners, nobody looked at her as a cop. They looked at her as another young woman trying to get by. She played her role perfectly. Her fellow officers admired her, but they also worried. They knew undercover work came with serious risks. If her cover was blown, the gang wouldn't hesitate. They had already been linked to threats, assaults, and even one unsolved killing. But Lisa never backed down. She told her mother she wanted to make a difference, that if people like her didn't step up, the gangs would keep destroying families. She believed she could do it safely. She believed her team would protect her. That belief would soon be tested, in the most tragic way possible. It was a warm night in June 1993. Lisa was getting ready for another shift. She slipped into casual clothes, nothing that would make her stand out. She carried only what she needed: a small purse, her car keys, and her badge tucked away where no one could see it. At home, her husband Michael was sitting on the couch flipping channels. He was used to her unusual hours. Lisa gave him a quick smile as she tied her shoes. She leaned over, kissed him on the cheek, and said she'd be back after work. It was the kind of goodbye they shared almost every night. Neither of them had any reason to think it would be the last. Michael asked if she'd be late, and she shrugged. Maybe, depends on what comes up. It was her usual answer. He nodded, gave her another smile, and told her to be safe. Lisa walked out the front door, locking it behind her. She climbed into her car and drove off into the night. For Michael, it was just another evening. He ordered some takeout, turned on the TV, and eventually went to bed. He expected to hear Lisa's car pull into the driveway sometime after midnight. But midnight came and went. Then 1, 2, 3 in the morning passed. Her side of the bed stayed empty. When Michael woke up later that morning, he thought maybe she had been called into something big. It wasn't unusual. But by the time afternoon arrived and she still wasn't home, worry set in. He picked up the phone and started making calls. That was the moment everything began to unravel. Later that same day, officers found Lisa's car. It was sitting on a lonely dirt road surrounded by tall grass and trees. At first glance, the car didn't look damaged. The engine was off. The keys were gone. But when deputies opened the door, a chill went through them. The driver's side door was wide open. The seat was pushed back like Lisa had stepped out quickly. Her purse wasn't inside. There were no footprints in the dirt, no signs of a struggle, just an empty car in the middle of nowhere. The road was rarely used. Locals said only farm trucks and hunters passed through. That made it worse. Whoever left the car there had chosen the spot carefully. Detectives examined every inch. They checked the trunk, the ditches, the nearby woods. Nothing. No blood, no clothing, no tire tracks leading away. It was as if Lisa had simply stepped out of her car and disappeared into thin air. When word spread, panic rippled through the police department. Officers who had worked alongside Lisa for years couldn't believe it. How could a trained cop vanish without a trace? Her family's worst fears were beginning to come true. When the call went out that Lisa's car had been found empty, the entire department froze. At first, some hoped it was a mistake, that maybe she had stepped away and would return. But when hours passed with no word, fear set in fast. Officers began calling every station, every hospital, every contact they could think of. Radios buzzed nonstop. Unit 12, do you copy? Any sign of Harper? The silence on the other end was crushing. Search teams were pulled together in minutes. Patrol cars raced down country roads with sirens blaring. Helicopters were scrambled, shining spotlights over fields and rivers. K-9 units sniffed along ditches and fence lines. The command center filled with maps, pins, and frantic voices trying to track her last known movements. Lisa wasn't just another missing person. She was a cop, one of their own. That made it personal. Officers who normally worked 12-hour shifts pushed through the night without sleep. Some cried in private, others clenched their fists in anger. Nobody could believe it. The sheriff stood in front of his men, his face pale, and said the words no one wanted to hear. Officer Harper is missing. Until she is found, every resource we have will be used. But as the night dragged on and searches turned up nothing, reality began to sink in. They were fighting against time. And for the first time, the department realized they might already be too late. By the next morning, the town was buzzing with whispers. Everyone had a theory. Some said the drug gang must have discovered Lisa was undercover. Others claimed she had been kidnapped by someone she trusted, maybe even a fellow cop. At the diner on Main Street, people leaned over coffee cups, speaking in hushed voices. They found her car wide open. That doesn't happen by accident, one man said. A woman shook her head. I bet the gang got her. They probably knew for weeks. Theories spread faster than facts. Some people even said Lisa had chosen to disappear, that maybe she ran away with another man or cracked under the pressure of her job. Those closest to her knew that wasn't true, but once rumors start, they're hard to stop. Inside the department, suspicion spread like wildfire. Officers asked each other questions they had never imagined. Was there a leak? Did someone give her up? The thought that one of their own could be involved sent a chill through the entire force. Lisa's husband begged for answers, but none came. Every possible theory only led to more fear, more doubt, more mystery. And with each passing day, the question grew louder. What really happened to Officer Lisa Harper? The night sky filled with the thumping sound of helicopter blades. Searchlights cut across dark fields, moving in long, bright sweeps. Every few seconds, the beam lit up barns, roads, and corn rows that stretched for miles. From the ground, families stood in their yards, watching the lights move back and forth, hoping they would reveal something. Inside the helicopter, deputies scanned with night vision goggles. They looked for anything. A car pulled off a trail, a figure walking through the fields, fresh tire tracks on dirt roads. Each time the pilot circled, hope rose. Each time nothing appeared, that hope sank again. On the police radios, chatter never stopped. Nothing on the east side. We're moving toward the riverbank. Any sign at the old mill? The replies were always the same, negative. For the people below, the sound of those helicopters became haunting. Every beat of the blades reminded them. A cop was missing. An officer who had sworn to protect them had vanished into thin air. By dawn, the search from the air had covered dozens of square miles. Yet when the helicopters landed, tired deputies climbed out with grim faces. No tracks, no movement, no sign of Lisa Harper. The sky had given them nothing. While helicopters scanned above, the ground search began at sunrise. Officers, deputies, and K-9 handlers lined up at the edge of fields. The dogs pulled hard against their leashes, sniffing the air, noses to the dirt. Volunteers from town joined in, carrying flashlights, sticks, and water bottles. Together, they walked in long rows across farmland. Every few yards, someone would stop. "Wait, what's this?" The group would gather, hearts pounding, only to find a broken bottle or a piece of trash. False alarms drained their energy, but nobody quit. They combed through ditches, climbed fences, and searched abandoned barns. Farmers opened their gates and let the teams onto their land. Neighbors offered maps of trails and old wells. Everyone wanted to help. Hours passed. The sun beat down, sweat soaked through shirts, dust clung to boots. Still, the ground gave nothing back. Not a shoe, not a scrap of clothing, not a single trace of Lisa Harper. Some volunteers whispered that it didn't make sense. If she had been taken, there should have been signs. If she had walked away, there should have been tracks. But there was nothing. As night fell again, searchers returned to the command center empty-handed. Exhaustion showed on every face. The sheriff looked over the map filled with red circles and lines. Entire areas had been cleared, but the one thing they needed, the answer to what happened, remained hidden. The farmland had swallowed Lisa whole. Inside the sheriff's office, the interrogation room stayed lit late into the night. Detectives brought in members of the drug ring Lisa had been investigating. Each man sat across from the table under the harsh light, chains clinking as they shifted in their chairs. "Where Lisa Harper?" a detective asked again and again. The answers never changed. "I don't know what you're talking about. I ain't seen her. You're wasting your time." The detectives pushed harder. They laid out photos of Lisa's car, explained how she had disappeared, and warned that killing a cop meant life behind bars. Still, the gang members stared back with cold faces. Some smirked. Some kept their eyes on the table. One suspect leaned back and muttered, "If something happened to her, wasn't us." His words sent chills down the detectives' spines. It sounded more like a threat than a denial. Hours of questioning gave nothing solid. No slips, no confessions, no signs of fear. When the detectives finally stepped out, the hallway was filled with silence. Officers traded frustrated looks. If the gang was guilty, they were hiding it well. If they weren't, then who had taken her? Either way, Lisa's trail was colder than ever. Days into the search, Lisa's husband Michael stepped in front of TV cameras. His hands shook as he unfolded a piece of paper. Reporters leaned forward. The lights were blinding. Michael cleared his throat and spoke, his voice breaking almost immediately. "Please, if anyone out there knows where Lisa is, bring her back. She's my wife. She's a daughter. She's a friend to so many. We just want her home." Behind him, officers stood with solemn faces. Michael's words echoed across the county, broadcast on the evening news. People sitting in their living rooms heard the desperation in his trembling voice. It no longer felt like just another missing person case. It felt like a personal tragedy that belonged to the whole community. Neighbors called in tips. Churches held prayer vigils. Flyers with Lisa's photo covered shop windows, telephone poles, and gas stations. But behind Michael's plea was a darker truth. Time was running out. Every day without Lisa made survival less likely. And though his words touched hearts across the town, they also deepened the dread that she might never come home. Just when detectives thought the trail had gone completely cold, new tips started to roll in. A man called the sheriff's office, swearing he had seen Lisa at a gas station the night she vanished. He described her in detail. Her hair pulled back, her badge clipped to her belt, even the way she looked over her shoulder. He said she seemed nervous, like she was waiting for someone. Before detectives could verify that lead, another witness came forward. This one, a woman, insisted she saw Lisa at a roadside motel. She claimed Lisa walked into one of the rooms with a man. The woman was so sure that she even described the car parked outside, a dark pickup with tinted windows. The two stories didn't match at all. Different locations, different details, but both witnesses swore they were telling the truth. Detectives drove out to both spots. They checked the gas station security tapes. Nothing. They combed through motel records. No Lisa. No sign she had ever been there. The conflicting reports left investigators frustrated and confused. Were these people mistaken? Were they lying for attention? Or, worse, Were they deliberately spreading false information to throw the case off? For the first time, some detectives began questioning their own sense of reality. If Lisa really had been seen alive, why didn't the evidence match? And if she hadn't, why did people keep insisting she was still out there? The mystery only grew deeper. Weeks stretched into months, and the investigation turned into a cycle of frustration. Every time detectives thought they had a break, it collapsed. A farmer reported seeing a strange car parked by his fields the night Lisa vanished. Detectives rushed out, walked the land, and even dug up parts of the soil. Nothing. Another tip came from a woman who swore she overheard men in a bar bragging about taking care of a cop. Detectives brought the men in, questioned them for hours, but it turned out to be drunken talk with no connection to Lisa at all. Phone calls poured into the sheriff's office day and night. Each one brought a flicker of hope. Maybe this caller had the clue they needed. But one by one, the tips fizzled. Some were honest mistakes. Others were cruel pranks. The more leads failed, the more exhausted the officers became. Desks piled high with notes. Maps filled with pins. Files grew thicker, but the truth stayed hidden. Frustration turned into quiet despair. Detectives stared at the evidence board, knowing Lisa's trail was slipping further away. Each dead end wasn't just another failure. It was another reminder that a fellow officer might never be found. As the months dragged on, the town began to lose patience. With no answers from police, people turned to rumors. Some whispered that maybe Lisa wasn't missing at all. Maybe she had simply run away. At the grocery store, in line at the bank, people said things in low voices. She was young. Maybe she didn't want the life she had. Others suggested she left her husband. What if she had someone else? They asked. Maybe she just packed up and left, and this is all a cover story. For Lisa's family, hearing those words was like a knife. Her husband Michael stood firm, insisting she would never leave him. Her mother shook with anger, telling anyone who would listen that Lisa loved her job and her family too much to vanish on purpose. But rumors spread faster than facts. With each passing week, more people believed them. The idea that a police officer might have faked her own disappearance became easier for some to accept than the darker possibility that she had been murdered. Inside the police department, officers felt torn. They knew Lisa. They trusted her. Yet the longer the case dragged on, the harder it became to fight back against the whispers. The town was no longer just mourning a missing officer. It was starting to question who Lisa really was. As months passed with no answers, the rumors grew darker. People stopped whispering about Lisa running away. Instead, they started suggesting something far more sinister. Some in town said Lisa had been silenced, not by the drug gang but by her own department. The theory spread like wildfire. She must have found out something she wasn't supposed to, one man said at a bar. Someone powerful didn't want it to come out. Radio hosts picked it up. Callers phoned in, hinting that the sheriff's office was hiding evidence. The story grew larger than the investigation itself. People asked, why would a police officer's case go cold so fast? Why were there no solid answers? Inside the department, tension boiled. Officers who had once stood united now eyed each other with suspicion. Was there really a leak? Did someone inside set Lisa up? Detectives who worked side by side began to wonder who they could trust. The case was no longer just about finding Lisa. It was about defending the integrity of the badge. And every day that passed without proof only fueled the belief that something was being buried, something too dangerous for the public to know. Lisa's family could not stay silent. Her parents and siblings pushed back against the ugly rumors. They went on local radio, wrote letters to newspapers, and spoke at community events. Her mother's voice shook with anger as she told reporters, "My daughter would never abandon us. She would never leave her husband. She was proud of her badge, proud of her work. She risked her life to protect people. Don't you dare say she ran away." Her father slammed his hand on the table during one interview, his face red with frustration. "Every day we wake up without answers. And instead of helping, people spread lies. Our family is living a nightmare and you think she just walked away. Shame on you." Lisa's siblings joined the fight too. Her younger brother said, "She was my hero. I don't care what anyone says, she didn't leave us. Somebody took her from us. Their words made headlines. For many in the community, hearing the raw emotion of Lisa's family changed things. The rumors still lingered, but now there was a louder, stronger voice pushing back. The family's pain was clear. They weren't just mourning Lisa's disappearance. They were battling to protect her memory. Behind closed doors, the department began to fracture. Officers who had worked side by side for years now questioned one another in silence. Some whispered the unthinkable. What if Lisa's cover had been blown from the inside? Someone had to know her assignment details. Someone had to know where she was going that night. Did a leak slip her name to the drug gang? Did they unknowingly send her into a trap? Every detective replayed the case in their head. Had they missed a warning sign? Did they push her into an assignment too dangerous for a rookie? The guilt crept into every corner of the building. One officer admitted privately, "I can't stop thinking, what if we killed her without even realizing it?" The words hit like a gut punch. Nobody answered, but nobody denied it either. Trust began to erode. Officers eyed one another with suspicion. A rumor here, a doubt there, and suddenly the brotherhood of the badge didn't feel so strong. The weight of failure pressed down hard. The case was cold, but inside the department the wound stayed open. For them, Lisa's disappearance wasn't just a mystery. It was a scar that wouldn't heal. By the end of 1994, hope had run thin. It had been more than a year since Lisa vanished, and there were still no answers, no evidence, no leads. Finally, authorities made the painful decision. Lisa Harper was officially declared missing, presumed dead. The words carried a finality her family wasn't ready to accept. The announcement was broadcast on the evening news. Anchors spoke in solemn tones, calling her fallen in the line of duty. In the town square, a memorial service was held. Candles flickered. People bowed their heads. Officers in uniform stood in silence, hats over their hearts. But for Lisa's family, the declaration didn't feel like closure. It felt like surrender. Her mother refused to believe it. She kept Lisa's room exactly the same, her clothes folded neatly, her bed made, waiting for the day her daughter might walk back through the door. Her husband Michael sat quietly at the memorial, torn between grief and anger. He wanted answers, not ceremonies. He wanted justice, not a headline. The town tried to move on, but for Lisa's family, the nightmare had no end. While the town tried to heal, Lisa's mother could not. To her, the words "presumed dead" meant nothing. She refused to accept that her daughter was gone. Inside her small house, Lisa's bedroom became a shrine. The clothes in her closet stayed neatly hung. Her favorite blue jacket still rested on its hanger just where she had left it. On the dresser, framed photos showed Lisa smiling at birthdays, family trips, and her graduation from the academy. The bed was carefully made each morning, smoothed by her mother's trembling hands. Not a single item was moved. Neighbors sometimes whispered that it was unhealthy, that the mother was stuck in denial. But to her, it was the only way she could keep Lisa close. She told friends, "One day she'll come home, and when she does, everything will be ready, just the way she left it." Every night she sat in the doorway of that room, staring at the photos until her eyes burned. She prayed out loud, asking God to send her daughter back. She spoke to Lisa as if she were still listening, promising that she would never give up. For the rest of the world, Lisa Harper was a memory. For her mother, Lisa was still alive, waiting to be found. Years slipped by and Lisa's case faded from the headlines. Inside the sheriff's office, her file sat on a high shelf, thick with reports, notes, and photos. New detectives, eager to prove themselves, sometimes pulled it down. They flipped through the pages, hoping a fresh set of eyes might spot something missed before. But every time the result was the same. No new evidence, no new leads, just the same unanswered questions written over and over again. The file became almost a curse. Detectives dreaded being assigned to it because they knew how it always ended. Long nights, endless dead ends, and no progress. Some officers quietly admitted they hated opening it at all. It was too painful, too frustrating, a reminder of their failure to protect one of their own. Lisa's photo stared out from the cover of the file, a young woman in uniform, smiling with confidence. Each time they saw it, detectives felt the same sinking weight in their stomachs. By the early 2000s, the case wasn't closed, but it was cold. It sat on the shelf, waiting, gathering dust, as if time itself was swallowing it whole. Every few years, a new tip would jolt the case back to life. A phone call, a letter, someone knocking on the station door late at night claiming they knew the truth. In 1998, a man swore he saw Lisa in another state, living under a new name. Detectives drove hundreds of miles, tracked the lead, and found nothing. In 2002, another caller said Lisa had been buried in a field outside town. Deputies dug up acres of farmland, searching for bones or scraps of clothing. All they found was dirt. Each new tip raised hope, then crushed it. Families held their breath every time the phone rang. Officers geared up, thinking maybe this was it, the break they had been waiting for. But again and again, the trail ended in disappointment. Some tips came from people desperate for attention. Others came from cruel pranksters. But the worst were the ones that felt real, the ones that pulled everyone in, only to collapse at the last second. By the mid-2000s, Lisa's case was more rumor than reality. Each dead end chipped away at hope, until the search for answers felt like chasing shadows. For years, Lisa's husband, Michael, tried to hold on. He wore his wedding ring every day, kept her photos on the nightstand, and told himself she might still come home. But as the years dragged on, the silence became too heavy. He grew tired of walking into the same house filled with memories but no answers. Every time the phone rang, his chest tightened, hoping it was news about Lisa. Every time it wasn't, another piece of him broke. Eventually, Michael made the hardest choice. He moved away. He left the house they had shared, the street where neighbors used to ask about her, and the town that carried nothing but pain. In time, he remarried. He started a new life, far from the shadow of Lisa's disappearance. But no matter how much he tried, guilt followed him. He worried people thought he had given up too soon, or worse, that he hadn't loved her enough to keep waiting. Michael never stopped caring. He simply couldn't live in the past anymore. For him, survival meant letting go, even if his heart never fully did. Lisa's fellow officers carried their own burden. For them, her disappearance wasn't just tragic, it was personal. She had been one of them, part of the family that came with wearing the badge. But year after year, with no answers, guilt settled in. They asked themselves the same questions over and over. Did we push her into an assignment she wasn't ready for? Did someone miss a warning sign? Did we fail her? When retirements came, many left with heavy hearts. At farewell parties, Lisa's name sometimes surfaced, but never for long. It was too painful, too raw. Some couldn't bring themselves to say her name at all. She became a ghost inside the department. Her photo hung on the wall, smiling in uniform, a reminder of both her courage and their failure. Officers walked past it every day, pretending not to notice, but always feeling the sting. For the men and women who once called her sister, Lisa Harper was more than a missing officer. She was the weight of unfinished duty, an unspoken scar none of them could heal. While others tried to move on, Lisa's mother refused. To her, Lisa wasn't gone, she was waiting to be found. And if the police couldn't do it, she would keep fighting until someone did. She sat at her kitchen table night after night, typing letters on her old typewriter. Governors, senators, police chiefs, even the FBI, no office was too big. She told Lisa's story in each letter, begged for fresh eyes, pleaded for new searches. Most replies were short and polite. "We're sorry for your loss. No new leads at this time." Some didn't reply at all. Each rejection felt like a knife twisting in her chest, but still she wrote more. She gathered every article, every clipping, every note about her daughter, stacking them neatly in boxes. She met with reporters, spoke at churches, and never stopped repeating the same line: "My daughter will not be forgotten." The world seemed ready to give up. Lisa's mother never did. She carried the fight alone, even as her hair turned gray and her hands shook from age. Her love became the only fuel keeping Lisa's case alive. By the early 2000s, Lisa's name had faded from the town's memory. The missing posters, once stapled to telephone poles, were now sun-bleached, curling at the edges, and ignored. News stations no longer covered anniversaries. Schools stopped warning kids with her story. Life went on. New crimes, new tragedies, and new faces filled the headlines. But inside one small house, Lisa's room was still untouched. Her mother still set a fresh flower on the dresser every week. For everyone else, Lisa Harper was a chapter closed. For her family, she was still here, just waiting to be found. In 2007, 14 years after Lisa disappeared, a farmer was checking his property on a quiet afternoon. His land sat about 40 miles from where Lisa had vanished. He walked past an old, unused well that had been covered with heavy boards for years. Normally, he wouldn't have thought twice about it. But that day something caught his eye. One of the boards had shifted, leaving a gap. Curious, he peered inside. The water at the bottom looked dark and still. Then floating just beneath the surface, he saw something pale. At first he thought it was an animal, but the shape was wrong, too human. His stomach dropped. Without another look, he rushed back to his house and called the sheriff. Within hours, deputies were on their way. The well that had sat forgotten for years was about to give up its secret. Sheriff's deputies rolled up to the farm just after sunset. Their cars kicked up dust as they pulled into the gravel drive. The farmer, still shaken, hurried out to meet them. He pointed toward the back field where the old well sat. As they walked, he explained what he had seen. His voice trembled. "It wasn't an animal," he said. "It looked like skin, like a body." The deputies exchanged grim looks but kept moving. The field was quiet except for the crunch of boots on dirt. When they reached the well, they saw the heavy boards nailed across the opening. One had come loose, hanging at an angle. A deputy leaned over carefully, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the darkness, reflecting off the still water far below. Something pale floated just beneath the surface. At first, it was hard to make out the shape, but as the light steadied, the outline became clearer. The deputy pulled back quickly, face pale. "Call it in," he said. Radios crackled. More units were summoned. Soon, the farmyard was full of headlights and uniformed officers, all standing in silence around the well. Everyone knew what this could mean, but no one dared to say it out loud. By dawn, a dive team had been called in. Neighbors gathered at the edge of the property, whispering as deputies set up ropes and lights around the old well. Two divers, suited in heavy gear, prepared to be lowered into the cold, muddy water. One deputy explained quietly, "This well is deeper than it looks. Be ready for anything." The crowd fell silent as the divers disappeared into the darkness. The rope creaked. Radios buzzed softly. Every second felt like an hour. Then through the static came the call, "We've found something." The words sent a chill through everyone standing above. Deputies moved closer, gripping the rope tighter. Slowly, the divers surfaced. Their hands clutched a bundle, waterlogged, heavy, and unmistakably human. Gasps broke out. The farmer turned away, unable to look. What had started as a normal day on a quiet farm had just become the moment the county would never forget. The divers passed the bundle up to deputies waiting at the edge of the well. Carefully, with steady hands, the officers pulled it out and laid it on the ground. The shape was clear now. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't debris. It was human. The area was quickly sealed off with yellow tape. Radios buzzed with urgent voices. Within minutes, the news began spreading across the county. At a local diner, someone rushed in and said, "They pulled a body out of that old farm well." Conversation stopped. Forks and coffee cups froze in midair. On police radios, the chatter was nonstop. Officers who had been on the force back in 1993 knew instantly who it could be. Some said nothing, their silence heavier than words. Others whispered one name, Lisa. Neighbors along the farm road stood behind the tape, staring in disbelief. Parents clutched their kids' shoulders, reminding them of the warnings they'd once heard about staying safe. By that evening, the entire county knew. The mystery that had haunted them for more than a decade wasn't over, but a piece of it had just been dragged out of the dark. The body was taken to the state forensic lab. Days felt like years for Lisa's family as they waited. Everyone knew what the answer would be, but still, there was a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't her. Forensic scientists ran the tests, pulling DNA samples and comparing them to Lisa's records. They also checked dental records, cross-referencing every detail. The evidence was undeniable. The call finally came. The remains were confirmed to be Lisa Harper. Her family broke down. Her mother wept, not because she was surprised, but because the faint thread of hope she had held for 14 years was now gone forever. Her husband, remarried but still scarred, felt the wound reopen. For the police, it was bittersweet. They had answers but no comfort. Lisa was finally found, but not in the way anyone had prayed for. The forensic team examined the remains more closely. What they found turned shock into horror. Lisa hadn't just been tossed into the well like trash. She had been carefully, deliberately hidden. Her body was wrapped tightly in a police-issued jacket, the same kind she once wore with pride. The sight of it made deputies sick. It was as if the killer wanted to mock her, to bury her identity along with her body. Ropes, thick and knotted, bound her tightly. Around her waist and ankles, investigators found heavy bricks tied on with the same rope. It was clear someone wanted her to sink, to stay at the bottom of that well forever. One detective whispered what everyone was thinking. This wasn't random. This was planned. The realization hit like a hammer. Whoever did this wasn't just trying to hide a body. They were sending a message. They wanted Lisa gone, completely erased from her family, from her department, from her community. The well had been sealed with thick wooden boards, nailed down and left to rot. For 14 years, no one had looked inside. The killer had almost succeeded. Almost. Now, the truth was clawing its way back to the surface. Detectives turned their attention back to the farm. The old well sat in the middle of the field, surrounded by tall grass and rusted farm equipment. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than an abandoned relic from another time. But as investigators studied it, the truth became clear. The well hadn't just been left alone. It had been sealed. Heavy wooden boards, thick with age and rot, were nailed across the top. Rusty nails jutted out, hammered deep as if someone wanted to make sure no one could ever pry it open. One investigator crouched and ran a hand across the boards. "This wasn't done to keep people safe," he said. "This was done to hide something." The boards explained everything. Search teams back in 1993 had scoured fields, barns, and rivers, but none had thought to break into a sealed well. To them, it was just another piece of old farm equipment. The killer had chosen the perfect hiding place, out in the open, but impossible to see inside. For 14 years, Lisa had been lying there, her secret guarded by wood and silence. The discovery raised new questions, but one thing was certain: Lisa hadn't simply vanished. She had been buried in plain sight. When the medical examiner released the first details to detectives, the tone of the investigation shifted instantly. For 14 years, the central question had been, where is Lisa Harper? Now that she was found, the haunting question became, who put her there, and why? The police-issued jacket was the detail no one could ignore. Ordinary killers wouldn't have access to department gear. Whoever wrapped her in it wanted to send a message. Was it someone mocking the badge? Or was it someone who wore the badge? Detectives sat around a table staring at the evidence photos. The rope, the bricks, the jacket, it all spoke of planning, not panic. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was organized, controlled, and deliberate. Whispers started again within the department. If Lisa had been betrayed, who had sold her out, who had known she was undercover that summer in 1993, and who had enough confidence to believe they could kill a cop and get away with it for years. For the community, the discovery was both a relief and a shock. People finally had an answer to the mystery that had haunted them, but that answer opened even darker doors. Parents told their kids the story as a warning. Even the protectors weren't safe. For Lisa's family, grief mixed with rage. Her mother asked the question out loud that everyone else whispered. Who put my daughter in that well? The well had given up its secret. Now it was up to investigators to dig through lies, corruption, and silence to find the person, or people, who had wanted Lisa Harper erased. The moment Lisa's body was confirmed, detectives reopened her file. What had once been a cold, forgotten case was now front and center. The dusty folders were pulled from storage, spread out across long tables in the sheriff's office. Photos of Lisa, smiling in uniform, smiling with her husband, were pinned next to maps of rural roads and fields. Notes written in fading ink were reread aloud. Every scrap of information that had once led nowhere was now back under the microscope. Detectives worked late into the night, coffee cups piling up, voices tense. They studied every phone record, every interview transcript. They traced her last known movements on maps, red markers circling the spot where her car had been found and another around the farm where her body had surfaced. One detective muttered, "We missed something back then. We have to find it now." Leads that had once seemed too small were suddenly re-examined. Witness statements were checked again for contradictions. Officers tracked down people who had moved away, knocking on doors and asking the same questions that had been asked 14 years earlier. This time felt different. The discovery in the well had given them proof that Lisa hadn't run away or simply disappeared. She had been murdered, and that meant someone out there had been carrying a terrible secret for over a decade. The department made a vow. They wouldn't let this case go cold again, not until they had the full truth of what happened to Officer Lisa Harper. Detectives knew the answers had to be buried in the people who lived through 1993. They started knocking on doors, tracking down old witnesses. Some had moved to new towns. Others still lived in the same houses, older now, carrying the weight of what they remembered. At the first few houses, doors closed quickly. "I don't know anything," one man said, shaking his head before shutting the door. Fear was written all over his face. Even after 14 years, some people still didn't want to talk. But not everyone stayed silent. A woman who had been a teenager in 1993 spoke up. She admitted she had seen something near the road where Lisa's car was found, men she recognized as connected to the drug gang. Back then, she hadn't dared tell police. "I was scared," she whispered. "Scared they'd come after me." Another old source, a former mechanic, revealed he'd overheard gang members talking in his shop about the cop girl who wouldn't be a problem anymore. He had kept quiet all those years, afraid of being pulled into it. Piece by piece, fragments of truth began to emerge. The fear that had silenced people in 1993 was fading, and new voices were finally filling in the gaps. Detectives wrote every word down, determined not to let these details vanish again. Detectives finally tracked down a man who had once been an informant for the department back in 1993. At first, he refused to talk. His eyes darted around the room, his hands shaking. But after hours of questioning, he finally leaned forward and whispered what no one wanted to hear. "Lisa's cover was blown," he said. According to him, the drug ring had known Lisa wasn't just another face in town. They knew she was a cop, an undercover rookie sent to bring them down, and they hadn't found that out by accident. "They were warned," the informant continued. "Somebody told them, somebody close." The room went silent. Detectives pressed for names, but the man shook his head. He claimed he didn't know exactly who had passed the information, but he was certain it hadn't come from the streets. It had come from inside law enforcement. The statement sent a chill through the entire team. If true, it meant Lisa hadn't just been unlucky. She had been betrayed. Detectives dug deeper, determined to find out if the informant's claim was true. They reviewed old reports, phone logs, and case notes. Buried in the paperwork, a pattern began to emerge. One officer's name kept showing up, an officer who had been close to Lisa during her undercover work. He had been one of the last people to see her alive, and strangely, he was connected to several files where details about Lisa's operation had gone missing. Rumors spread quickly inside the department. Some officers whispered that this man had been seen meeting with known gang members. Others said he always seemed to have extra cash, far beyond what his salary could explain. The idea was almost too much to believe. A police officer, one of their own, possibly working for the very criminals they were trying to stop. But the evidence was adding up. The phone calls, the missing files, the unexplained money. Detectives realized the leak wasn't just a theory anymore. The betrayal was real, and it had come from inside the badge. Detectives traced back every step of Lisa's final night. The files showed who she spoke to, where she went, and when she was last seen. Again, the same name surfaced, the officer now under suspicion. He had signed off as the last person to make contact with her, According to his report, he'd simply checked in, then left her to handle her assignment. But as investigators studied the timeline, gaps appeared. His story didn't add up. Phone records showed calls from his number to a known associate of the drug gang, just hours before Lisa disappeared. And his patrol car had been logged near the very dirt road where her abandoned vehicle was later found. For detectives, suspicion hardened into certainty. This wasn't a coincidence. The man who was supposed to protect her had been the last to see her alive. When confronted, the officer denied everything. He insisted he was being framed, that the calls were mistakes, that the records were wrong. But the more he talked, the more his words sounded like excuses. For Lisa's family, the realization was devastating. Their daughter hadn't just been a victim of crime. She had been betrayed by someone wearing the same badge she trusted with her life. Detectives brought the officer into the interview room. The air was heavy, the blinds shut, the tape recorder rolling. Across the table, the man looked calm at first, leaning back in his chair with arms crossed. "Tell us about the night Lisa disappeared," one detective said. The officer repeated his story, how he had checked on Lisa, then went his own way. His voice was steady, almost rehearsed, but detectives weren't buying it. They slid phone records across the table, then explained these calls to a known gang member, just hours before she vanished. The officer's jaw tightened. He called it a mistake, a wrong number. Next came the patrol logs showing his car near the dirt road. "Explain this," they pressed. He shifted in his chair, blaming faulty records, blaming anyone but himself. The calm mask was starting to crack. Detectives kept pressing, layer after layer. Each excuse he gave fell apart under the weight of the evidence. What had once looked like coincidence now looked like a setup. Finally, the officer leaned forward, his face tense, his voice sharp. "You're trying to pin this on me. I had nothing to do with it." But by then, his words meant little. The evidence was closing in like a noose. Detectives didn't need a confession to see the truth. When detectives shared their findings with Lisa's family, the room went silent. Her mother shook her head, unable to believe it. Her father's hands trembled. For years, they had begged for answers, but this answer felt worse than no answer at all. Lisa hadn't just been killed. She had been betrayed by one of her own, a man who wore the same badge she wore, a man she trusted to protect her, a man she likely considered a brother. Her siblings stared in disbelief, trying to process it. Her husband lowered his head, his voice breaking. "She trusted them," he whispered. She trusted him. For the family, the betrayal cut deeper than the murder itself. It meant Lisa had walked straight into danger, never suspecting the threat was standing right beside her. Inside the department, the truth spread like wildfire. Officers who had once shared locker rooms and patrol cars with the accused man felt sick. The betrayal wasn't just of Lisa, it was of the entire force. It was a double wound, losing one of their own and realizing another had sold her out. For Lisa's mother, the pain was unbearable. She had fought for 14 years, hopping for justice. Now she knew justice would never bring her daughter back or erase the betrayal that had destroyed her. In 2008, it finally happened. Police gathered outside a quiet house in the early morning. Their target wasn't a stranger, it was one of their own, the officer long suspected of betraying Lisa. The scene was tense. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains as squad cars lined the street. When the officer stepped outside, half-dressed and shocked, detectives moved fast. He was pushed against a patrol car, handcuffed, and read his rights. Cameras clicked. News crews caught every second. At almost the same time, two gang members were pulled from their homes miles away. They had lived free for 14 years, believing they'd gotten away with it. Now, their time was up. Word spread instantly. Radios buzzed. TVs lit up with breaking news. Arrests made in the Lisa Harper case. For her family, it was the first real step toward justice. Lisa's mother wept when she saw the footage. "Finally," she whispered. Her brothers clenched their fists in relief and rage all at once. But for the community, the image of a police officer in handcuffs cut deep. The badge was supposed to protect people, not betray them. And now, one of their own was being led away as a criminal. After the arrests, the real work began. Prosecutors gathered every scrap of evidence they could find. Old files were pulled from dusty boxes. Photos, phone records, and maps were spread across long tables. Detectives sat shoulder to shoulder, combing through details they hadn't touched in years. This time there was no room for mistakes. They couldn't afford another dead end. Witnesses were tracked down and asked to testify. Some were terrified, afraid of gang retaliation, but detectives reassured them, "You're safe now." A former mechanic agreed to take the stand and repeat what he'd overheard years ago. The woman who saw men near Lisa's abandoned car finally gave her statement, this time on record. Even the informant, who had first revealed Lisa's cover was blown, agreed to testify. His words would be key to proving the betrayal had come from inside the badge. The prosecutors knew the defense would fight hard. They'd claim bad records, unreliable witnesses, and fading memories. But the team worked day and night to prepare. They built timelines, cross-checked phone logs, and created clear paths from the officer to the gang members. This case wasn't just about murder. It was about betrayal, corruption, and a community's faith in justice. The courtroom battle loomed, and no one was taking it lightly. The trial began in early spring. The courthouse was packed before sunrise. Reporters filled every seat they could find. Cameras clicked outside as vans from national networks lined the street. This wasn't just a local story anymore. Inside, Lisa's family sat together in the front row. Her mother clutched a photo of her daughter, refusing to let go. Her husband, older now and remarried, sat with quiet guilt in his eyes. Her siblings held each other's hands. 14 years of waiting had brought them here. At the defense table, the accused sat in silence. The corrupt officer stared forward, his jaw tight, refusing to look at anyone in the gallery. The two gang members leaned back, almost casual, as if they didn't care. Their calmness chilled everyone watching. When the judge entered, the room fell quiet. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder. The prosecutor stood and began with a simple line. "This case is about trust, and about how that trust was broken in the worst way." Gasps filled the room as the first details were laid out. Lisa's undercover role, her disappearance, and the shocking discovery in the farm well. For the first time, the town heard the full story in one place. Everyone knew this trial wasn't going to be quick. It was going to dig deep into betrayal, lies, and murder, and no one would leave untouched. The courtroom grew tense as one of the key witnesses took the stand. He was a former informant, nervous, his hands shaking as he gripped the microphone. He explained how, in 1993, Lisa had been called to a late-night meeting. She believed it was with a source who had new information on the drug ring. It sounded urgent, too important to ignore. She told no one, just like her undercover rules required. But the meeting was a lie. The witness said word had spread among the gang. Lisa wasn't one of them. She was a cop. And that night she was walking into a trap. The jury leaned forward as he described what happened next. Lisa arrived at the location, expecting answers. Instead, men were waiting. She was surrounded before she even had a chance to fight back. The gang members didn't act alone. The witness explained how the corrupt officer had helped set everything up. He gave the gang details of Lisa's movements. He made sure she would be alone. For the first time, the jurors heard how carefully planned it was. Lisa didn't vanish by chance. She was hunted. Silence filled the room. No one moved. For Lisa's family, the truth was both a relief and a fresh wound. When the prosecutor shifted to the next part of the story, the room grew even quieter. Every eye was fixed on him as he explained what had happened after the ambush. Lisa had been killed quickly. Her killers wasted no time. They already had a plan. That very night she was taken to a farm outside town. There, on the edge of a forgotten property, stood an old water well. It was deep, dark, and rarely used. The prosecutor laid out the details step by step. Lisa's body was wrapped in a police-issued jacket, tied with thick rope and weighed down with bricks. The killers lowered her into the muddy water. Then they covered the well with heavy wooden boards and nailed them down. To anyone passing by, it looked abandoned. In reality, it was a hidden grave. The jury sat frozen, horrified. Many had grown up driving past old wells on farmland. They knew how easy it would be to miss something like that. Reporters scribbled notes as the prosecutor explained how Lisa remained there for 14 years. While her family searched, while officers begged for answers, while rumors spread, she was hidden in plain sight, less than an hour from home. The community had believed her body might have been buried far away or destroyed or taken across state lines. The truth was worse. She had been right there all along, erased not by accident but by design. When the prosecutor finished, gasps spread across the courtroom. People whispered to one another, struggling to process the cruelty of it. Lisa's mother wept silently, her hands trembling. The secret of the well had finally been spoken aloud, and it was almost too much to bear. After weeks of testimony, the air inside the courthouse felt heavy. Reporters called it one of the most emotional trials the state had ever seen. The jury had listened to days of evidence, Lisa's last steps, the betrayal inside the police force, and the chilling cover-up. Now, after hours of deliberation, they filed back into the courtroom. The room was silent as the judge asked for their decision. The foreman stood, holding a slip of paper in his hands. His voice was steady but firm. Guilty. One by one, the charges were read aloud: murder, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. Each time the answer was the same: guilty, guilty, guilty. The corrupt officer sat stone-faced, refusing to show emotion. The two gang members stared at the floor, avoiding the eyes of the jury. But for Lisa's family, the words hit like a tidal wave. Tears streamed down her mother's face. Her siblings held one another tightly. The judge handed down the sentences: life in prison without parole. For the first time in 14 years, there was no escaping justice. Reporters rushed outside to broadcast the news. Crowds gathered on the courthouse steps, some cheering, others crying. The community had waited so long for this moment. But inside the courtroom, Lisa's family felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Justice, at least on paper, had been served. Yet it could never bring Lisa back. The empty chair at family dinners, the untouched bedroom at her mother's house, those would never be filled. As the judge's gavel struck, the trial was over. The killers were going away forever. But for Lisa's loved ones, the pain of betrayal and loss would remain for the rest of their lives. The courtroom was nearly empty when the final motions ended. Most reporters had already rushed outside, eager to file their stories. The jurors were escorted out, pale and shaken, but Lisa's family remained seated in the front row, silent and still. Her mother clutched the photo she had carried through the entire trial. It was the same picture of Lisa she had kept on her dresser for 14 long years. The moment the gavel struck, signaling the end, she finally broke. She wept loudly, her sobs echoing in the quiet room. Every tear carried the weight of years spent searching, writing letters, begging for answers. She had prayed for justice, but now that it had come, it felt hollow. "They're gone to prison," someone whispered to her, as if that would help, but it didn't. Nothing could. Her daughter was still gone. Justice couldn't hug her. Justice couldn't walk through the front door, smiling in uniform. The prosecutors approached, offering kind words. Detectives, too. They said things like, "We finally did it and she can rest now." But Lisa's mother shook her head. Her grief filled the room in a way no words could soften. For years, she had imagined her daughter's return. She had kept her room untouched, her bed neatly made, waiting. The verdict only confirmed what her heart had refused to accept. Lisa was never coming home. The killers would spend life behind bars, but for a mother that wasn't victory. It was too late. As the family slowly stood to leave, reporters waiting outside prepared to tell the world about justice served. But inside, the truth was quieter, heavier. A mother's tears told the real story. Justice had come, but peace never would. Lisa Harper's story did not end with the verdict. Across the nation, police departments and communities studied the case. It became more than a murder. It became a warning. She had been young, brave, and willing to risk everything to serve. Yet her death showed that danger doesn't only come from criminals on the street. Sometimes, the greatest threat comes from betrayal within. That truth shook people everywhere. In training rooms, her name was mentioned as a reminder of trust and vigilance. At conferences, her case was brought up to stress integrity inside the badge. For officers, the lesson was clear. Loyalty must be stronger than corruption, or tragedies like this will repeat. Back in her hometown, Lisa's memory lived on. A plaque with her name was placed inside the police station. Every recruit who walked through the doors saw it. Each year, a small crowd gathered on the courthouse steps to honor her. Lisa Harper had vanished in silence, but her story spoke louder than anyone could have imagined. For the town and for her family, her name would never fade. It was etched into memory forever.